Commander Zixtal stood before the massive viewing screen aboard the research vessel Cathvara, watching another star system die. The crystalline being's normally bright blue light had dimmed to a sickly pale glow as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. 3 more worlds had fallen to the Vorthik in the past day, their populations consumed and converted into biomass for the growing swarm. The bridge crew worked in tense silence around him. Officers from a dozen different species monitored communications channels, tracking the unstoppable advance of creatures that had appeared from beyond the galactic rim 6 months ago. Every attempt to communicate with the Vorthik had failed. Every military engagement had ended in complete defeat. Dr. Velthara approached from her science station, her tentacled form moving with the grace typical of her aquatic species. Her large eyes showed the same fear that had gripped the entire Hegemony Council since this nightmare began. "Commander, we have received confirmation from the Altarian Defense Fleet," she said, her voice carrying the musical tones of her people. They lasted 17 minutes against the Vorthik bioships. Zixtal's internal light flickered with anger and despair. The Altarians had possessed some of the most advanced energy weapons in the galaxy. Their shields could deflect the power of small suns. Yet they had been swept aside like space dust by these organic monstrosities that seemed to adapt to every weapon used against them. How many ships did they destroy before Ling? Zixtal asked, though he already suspected the answer. None? Sir, the Vorthik vessels absorbed their energy weapons and used the power to grow larger. Our conventional tactics are completely useless against them. The communications officer, a tall insectoid named Claketh, suddenly straightened at his station. "Commander, priority transmission from Hegemony High Command on Velthara Prime." The main screen shifted to show the familiar form of Chancellor Morden, the ancient leader of the Hegemony Council. The elderly being's usually calm demeanor had been replaced by barely controlled panic. "All fleet commanders, the situation has become critical beyond our worst projections. The Vorthik have divided into multiple swarms and are advancing on 17 different fronts simultaneously. At their current rate of expansion, they will reach the core worlds within 40 days. Zixtal felt his crystalline structure vibrate with shock. 40 days. The heart of galactic civilization had perhaps 40 days left before these biomechanical horrors consumed everything they had built over millennia of peaceful cooperation. "We are therefore authorizing Project Deathreach," the Chancellor continued. "All available resources are to be devoted to contacting potential allies from Class 10 through Class 15 Deathworlds. We need species that understand warfare on a level our civilized worlds have never experienced." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Project Deathreach had been discussed in theoretical terms for decades, but no one had ever seriously considered implementing it. The idea of deliberately seeking contact with beings from high classification, Deathworlds, had always seemed too dangerous to contemplate. Dr. Velthara was the first to speak. "Sir, the only Class 12. Deathworld in our database with confirmed intelligent life is designated Sol 3. The inhabitants call it Earth." Zixtal accessed the file through his neural link and immediately wished he had not. The planet Earth was a nightmare world of constant violence and environmental extremes. Its gravity was 3 times galactic standard. Its atmosphere contained toxic levels of oxygen that would kill most civilized species within minutes. A surface was regularly bombarded by radiation from its unstable star, and massive storms capable of leveling cities occurred with frightening regularity. But it was the dominant species that truly horrified him. Humans, as they called themselves, were bipedal predators with forward-facing eyes and exposed teeth. They had evolved from persistence hunters and had spent their entire history engaged in almost constant warfare. Their bodies were designed for violence, capable of surviving injuries that would be instantly fatal to any hegemony species. "These creatures are monsters," Collect 8 said, reading over the same data. "They consume the flesh of other animals and have made their entire planet toxic to support their biology. How could such beings possibly help us?" Dr. Velthara hesitated before answering. "According to the xenobiological reports, their method of warfare is completely different from ours. They use kinetic weapons that fire solid projectiles at extreme velocities. They engage in close combat using handheld weapons. Most disturbing of all, they seem to consider death in battle as somehow honorable." Zixtal studied the tactical analyses included in the human files. These beings did not fight. The clean, long-range energy duels favored by civilized species. Instead, they closed to point-blank range and battered their enemies with brute force. They used explosives, chemical weapons, and even biological warfare when necessary. Their entire military philosophy seemed based on the idea that any tactic was acceptable if it achieved victory. "It is precisely because they are monsters that they might succeed where we have failed," Zixtal said finally. "The Vorthic adapt to energy weapons and shield technologies. But perhaps they cannot adapt to the crude brutality these humans employ." The science officer pulled up additional data on human military history. Wars spanning their entire recorded civilization, conflicts that had claimed hundreds of millions of lives, weapons capable of destroying their own planet multiple times over. Yet somehow, these savage beings had recently achieved faster-than-light travel and were beginning to explore beyond their solar system. "Sir, we do not even know if they will respond to our transmission," Dr. Velthara pointed out. "The psychological profiles suggest they are highly territorial and suspicious of outsiders. They might simply ignore us or even attack our ships if we approach their system." Zixtal considered this. Every civilized species in the galaxy had joined the Hegemony Council peacefully, drawn by the promise of knowledge and trade. But humans had no such diplomatic traditions. They had never encountered alien life and might react with the same violence they showed toward members of their own species. "Prepare the distress beacon," he ordered. "Include all relevant data about the Vorthic threat and our technological capabilities. Make it clear that we are asking for help, not demanding it. These beings respect strength, so we must also show them that we are not completely helpless." The communications team worked for several hours to prepare the transmission. They included visual records of Vorthic attacks, technical specifications of hegemony ships and weapons, and star charts showing the extent of the threat. Most importantly, they crafted a message that would appeal to whatever sense of honor or duty these violent beings might possess. "Broadcast ready, Commander," Clegth reported. Zixtal took one last look at the tactical display showing Vorthic positions advancing on multiple fronts. Red markers indicated consumed systems, while yellow showed worlds currently under attack. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Within weeks, the expanding swarms would overwhelm the remaining defenses and consume the core worlds of galactic civilization. "Transmit the signal to the Sol system," he commanded. "May whatever gods these humans worship grant us mercy." Meanwhile, 47 light-years away, Admiral Jake Morrison sat in the Pentagon Situation Room, staring at a message that had just changed everything. The translation software had taken 6 hours to decode the alien transmission, but the meaning was crystal clear. Somewhere out in the galaxy, an entire civilization was being destroyed by an enemy they could not defeat. Dr. Kevin Price, the world's leading expert in theoretical xenolinguistics, looked up from his analysis. "The mathematical constants check out perfectly, Admiral. This is definitely from an advanced alien intelligence. The linguistic patterns suggest a coalition of multiple species working together." General Lisa Hayes leaned forward across the conference table. "What exactly are they asking for?" "Help," Morrison said simply. They're facing some kind of biological weapon that's consuming entire star systems. Their conventional weapons are useless against it, and they're desperate enough to contact what they classify as a Deathworld species for assistance. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity's first contact with alien life was a cry for help from beings facing extinction. The message had traveled for decades to reach Earth, meaning the situation might already be hopeless by the time any human ships could arrive. "Sir, we have to respond," Dr. Price said. "This could be the most important moment in human history." Morrison studied the star charts included in the transmission. The alien coalition controlled hundreds of star systems and possessed technology far beyond anything humanity had developed. Yet they were losing badly against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. "What makes them think we can succeed where they have failed?" General Hayes asked. "According to their data, we fight differently than they do," Morrison replied. "They use energy weapons and long-range tactics. We still rely heavily on kinetic weapons and close combat. Maybe that difference is exactly what's needed." He stood and walked to the window overlooking the sprawling military complex below. In the distance, he could see the construction yards, where humanity's first interstellar warships were nearing completion. The used Defiance dropped out of hyperspace near Velthera Prime with a flash of distorted light that made every sensor on the alien research vessel scream warnings. Captain Ryan Blake stood on his bridge, watching the massive alien ship that hung in space before them like a crystalline cathedral. 6 other human vessels materialized around the Defiance, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that the aliens had never seen before. Blake had spent the 3-week journey studying everything. They knew about the species that had sent the distress call. The information was limited, but it painted a picture of beings so different from humans that communication itself might prove impossible. They were peaceful, logical, and had apparently never fought a real war in their entire recorded history. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the alien vessel," Lieutenant Sophie Martinez reported from her communication station. "The translation matrix is working, but some concepts don't seem to have direct equivalents in their language." "Put it through," Blake ordered. He had been a Marine before joining the Space Force, with combat experience in 3 different conflicts. The idea of meeting aliens fascinated him, but he remained ready for anything. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a crystalline being that seemed to be made of living glass. Commander Zixtal's form pulsed with soft blue light as he spoke, his translated words carrying an undertone of desperate hope. "Human vessel, I am Commander Zixtal of the hegemony research ship Kethvara. We are grateful beyond measure that you have answered our call for assistance." Blake studied the alien commander carefully. Despite the translation, he could hear the stress in the being's voice. Whatever these creatures were facing had them terrified. "Commander Zixtal, on Captain Ryan Blake of the United Earthship Defiance. We received your distress signal and came as quickly as possible. What can you tell us about this enemy you're fighting?" The alien's light dimmed noticeably. "The Vorthik appeared 6 months ago from beyond the galactic rim. They are biomechanical, entities that consume organic matter and convert it into more of their kind. Every weapon we have used against them has proven ineffective. They adapt to our energy-based systems and use the absorbed power to grow stronger." Dr. Amy Foster, the mission's xenobiologist, stepped forward from her position near the science station. She had studied every available piece of data about alien biology during the journey, and her excitement at actually meeting extraterrestrial life was barely contained. "Commander, would it be possible for us to meet in person? There's so much we could learn from each other." The request seemed to surprise Zixtel, whose light flickered uncertainly. Yes, that would be acceptable. However, I must warn you that our environmental requirements are quite different. We will need to meet aboard a neutral vessel with appropriate atmospheric controls. An hour later, Blake found himself standing in the docking bay of the Kethvara, breathing recycled air through a portable environmental suit. The alien ship was beautiful in a way that human technology could never match, with curved walls that seemed to grow rather than being built. Everything pulsed with soft bioluminescent light that created an almost dreamlike atmosphere. Colonel Marcus Stone, Blake's military advisor, kept his hand near his sidearm despite orders to maintain peaceful intentions. The former Special Forces officer had survived too many dangerous situations to completely relax, even during what was supposed to be a diplomatic meeting. Captain, something feels off about this place. It's too quiet. Dr. Foster ignored the colonel's concerns, instead marveling at the alien architecture. This is incredible. The entire ship appears to be grown rather than constructed. The level of bioengineering required for something like this is beyond anything we've ever attempted. They were escorted through corridors filled with beings from species they had never imagined. Tall, graceful creatures with gossamer wings floated past alongside insectoid beings with compound eyes and chitinous exoskeletons. A group of aquatic aliens moved through tubes filled with flowing water that somehow defied gravity. The conference room they entered was filled with the strangest collection of beings Blake had ever seen. Commander Zixtal stood at the head of a curved table, his crystalline form casting rainbow patterns on the walls. Dr. Velfara, an octopus-like creature with intelligent eyes, observed the humans with scientific interest. Several other aliens completed the delegation, each representing a different member species of the Hegemony Council. The moment the humans entered the room, Blake could see the aliens' reaction. Dr. Velfara's tentacles coiled defensively, while one of the insectoid beings actually took a step backward. Zixtal's light flickered with what could only be described as fear. "Please be seated," Zixtal said, gesturing toward chairs that had been hastily modified for human physiology. "We must discuss the threat that faces all of us." Blake took his seat carefully, noticing how the furniture creaked under his weight. These beings were clearly built for much lighter gravity than Earth standard. "Commander, before we discuss strategy, perhaps we should share some basic information about our respective species. It might help us work together more effectively." Dr. Foster nodded eagerly. "I'd love to learn about your biology and culture. The diversity of species working together here is fascinating." The innocent comment seemed to have an unexpected effect. Dr. Velfara's tentacles writhed with agitation as she consulted a data pad with trembling appendages. "Forgive me, but we have been reviewing the biological data included in your initial response to our distress call. Your species ... How do you survive on such a hostile world?" Blake exchanged glances with his team. They had expected the aliens to be impressed by human technology, not horrified by their basic biology. "I'm not sure what you mean. Earth is just our home world. Your planet has gravitational force 3 times what most of us consider normal," Dr. Velfara continued, her voice rising with what sounded like panic. "The atmospheric composition would be toxic to most galactic species. Irradiation levels from your star would cause genetic damage within days of exposure." Colonel Stone leaned back in his chair, which groaned ominously under the stress. "Ma'am, with respect, Earth isn't really that bad once you get used to it. Sure, we've got hurricanes, earthquakes, and the occasional volcano, but most humans live full lives without any major problems." The casual way he dismissed catastrophic natural disasters seemed to horrify the aliens even further. One of the insectoid beings began making rapid, clicking sounds that the translator interpreted as distressed chittering. Dr. Foster, sensing the growing tension, tried to steer the conversation toward common ground. Perhaps we could discuss your scientific methods. The biotechnology evident in this ship is remarkable. How do you grow structures this complex? We do not grow them, Zixtal replied, his confusion evident in the way his light pulsed irregularly. They are cultivated by specialized organisms over many years. The process requires careful environmental control and genetic manipulation. Surely your species understands such techniques? Actually, most of our technology is built using refined metals and synthetic materials, Dr. Foster explained. We shape matter using heat and mechanical force rather than biological processes. The aliens exchanged what could only be described as horrified looks. Dr. Velthara's tentacles writhed as she spoke. You forge your tools with fire and brute force? Like primitive metallurgy? Blake was beginning to understand the problem. These beings had developed along completely different paths than humanity. They saw the universe as something to be gently shaped and carefully cultivated, while humans approached problems with directness and force. Let me ask you something, Blake said, trying a different approach. How do your people typically resolve conflicts between different groups? Through negotiation and consensus, Zixtal replied immediately. Violence is considered a last resort, and even then, we prefer non-lethal methods of restraint. Most civilized species have not fought actual wars for thousands of years. Colonel Stone nearly choked on his recycled air. No wars? How do you handle territorial disputes? Resource conflicts? Ideological differences? We discuss them until agreement is reached, Dr. Velthara said, as if this should be obvious. Why would beings resort to violence when logical discourse can resolve any disagreement? The human delegation sat in stunned silence. These aliens had created a galactic civilization based on principles that would be considered impossibly naive by human standards. No wonder they were helpless against an enemy that didn't want to negotiate. Blake decided to be direct. Commander, I need to understand something. Your distress signal mentioned that conventional weapons are ineffective against these Vorthik. What exactly have you tried? Zixtal activated a holographic display showing recordings of battles against the biomechanical invaders. The human team watched as beautiful alien ships fired streams of pure energy at massive organic vessels that seemed to absorb the attacks and grow larger. The alien tactics were sophisticated but completely predictable, following patterns that an adaptive enemy could easily counter. We have employed our most advanced plasma weapons, gravitational disruptors, and quantum cascade generators, Zixtal explained. The Vorthik scout fleet appeared on the edge of the Gamma Centauri system like a nightmare made flesh. 12 massive bioships drifted through space, their organic hulls pulsing with sickly green light as they began the process of consuming everything in their path. Each vessel was the size of a small city, covered in writhing tentacles and chitinous armor that seemed to shift and adapt, even as the human and alien observers watched. Captain Blake stood on the bridge of the U.E.'s Defiance, studying the enemy formation through his tactical display. Beside him, Commander Zixtal watched nervously as the human crew prepared for battle with an efficiency that the crystalline being found both impressive and terrifying. Captain, the Vorthik ships are beginning their consumption pattern, Lieutenant Martinez reported from her sensor station. They're releasing smaller organisms to break down the asteroid belt and convert the raw materials into additional biomass. Blake nodded, his expression grim as he watched millions of tiny creatures swarm over the rocky debris that had once been a planet. The sight was both fascinating and horrifying, like watching a cancer consume healthy tissue. How long before they notice us? Unknown, sir. According to hegemony data, they typically ignore military vessels until they're fired upon. Then they adapt their defenses and counterattack. Dr. Foster, who had insisted on remaining on the bridge during the engagement, pulled up her analysis of the Vorthik biological structure. Captain, I've been studying their adaptive capabilities. They seem to absorb energy-based attacks and use the power to strengthen their armor. But I don't see any mechanism for dealing with purely physical damage. Commander Zixtel's light flickered with confusion. Dr. Foster, surely you understand that kinetic weapons are completely obsolete. The energy requirements alone make them impractical for space combat. Blake smiled grimly as he activated the ship's weapon systems. The Defiance and her sister ships had been designed with human military doctrine in mind, carrying an arsenal that would have made a 21st century admiral weep with joy. Commander, you're about to get a lesson in human warfare. We never really abandoned kinetic weapons, we just made them bigger. The first Vorthic bioship to notice the approaching fleet immediately began shifting its defensive configuration. The organic armor flowed like liquid as the creature prepared to absorb whatever energy weapons the newcomers might deploy. What it got instead was something completely outside its evolutionary experience. All ships, this is Blake, the captain announced over the tactical network. Weapons free. Target the largest bioship and show these things what a real predator looks like. The human ships opened fire simultaneously, and space erupted with violence that shocked both the Vorthic and their alien observers. Instead of clean energy beams, the human vessels unleashed a storm of physical projectiles, moving at relativistic speeds. Tungsten rods accelerated by magnetic rails punched through bioship armor like bullets through tissue paper. Missile swarms, carrying nuclear warheads, detonated against organic hulls in blossoms of atomic fire. Commander Zixtel watched in amazement as the lead Vorthak vessel, which had shrugged off every energy weapon the hegemony could deploy, began bleeding atmosphere and biofluid from dozens of massive wounds. Impossible. How are you penetrating their adaptive armor? Because there's nothing to adapt to, Blake replied, watching as his gunners adjusted their aim. You can't evolve resistance to having holes punched through you by chunks of metal moving at 50,000 kilometers per second. The Vorthic fleet reacted with surprising speed, spreading out and beginning their own assault on the human ships. Bioelectric discharges that could disable a hegemony vessel harmlessly grounded out against the Defiance's primitive but effective armor plating. Organic acid that could eat through alien hulls was neutralized by ablative coatings designed to handle atmospheric re-entry. Sir, we're taking damage to the outer hull, reported Chief Engineer Tony Chun from the damage control station. Nothing critical, but these things pack a punch. Blake nodded, his attention focused on the tactical display as the battle developed. The Vorthic were learning and adapting even as they fought, trying to understand this new enemy that didn't follow the rules of galactic warfare. Tony, reroute power from the environmental systems to the railguns. We don't need perfect life support for the next few hours. Aye, sir. Oxygen levels dropping to minimum safe levels. Dr. Foster looked around nervously as the lights dimmed and the air grew noticeably thinner. Captain, is it safe to reduce life support during combat? Ma'am, humans fought wars and environments a lot worse than this for thousands of years before we ever left Earth, Blake replied. A little thin air never killed anyone who wasn't already dying. The casual way he discussed potentially fatal environmental conditions horrified Commander Zixtel, but the results spoke for themselves. The human ships were operating at peak efficiency, while the Vorthic struggled to understand how creatures could function in conditions that would incapacitate most galactic species. Lieutenant Commander Pete Williams, leading the Defiance's Marine detachment, had been monitoring the enemy formations and spotted an opportunity. Captain, the second Vorthic ship has taken enough damage to compromise its structural integrity. Request permission to attempt a boarding action. Blake considered the request for exactly 3 seconds. In any sane military doctrine, boarding an alien bioship during active combat would be considered suicide. But human military doctrine had never been accused of being sane. Permission granted, Pete. Take your boys and show them what Marines are for. Zixtel's crystalline form pulsed with shock. Captain, surely you cannot be serious? No civilized species attempts to board enemy vessels during active combat. The risk to personnel is astronomical. Commander, the risk of doing nothing is higher. Blake replied, Besides, my Marines have been spoiling for a fight since we left Earth. The U's Defiance maneuvered close to the damaged Vorthic vessel, dodging bioelectric discharges and streams of corrosive fluid as Williams led his boarding party across the gap between ships. The Marines moved through space using thruster packs and magnetic anchors, carrying weapons that would have been familiar to soldiers from centuries past. Inside the bioship, the environment was a nightmare of organic corridors and pulsing walls that seemed to watch the intruders with alien intelligence. Williams and his team moved carefully through passages designed for creatures that bore no resemblance to human anatomy, their weapons ready for anything. Contact front, Sergeant Maria Santos called out as a group of Vorthic defenders emerged. From side passages, the creatures were smaller than their ship-sized parents, but no less dangerous, with razor-sharp claws and bioelectric organs that could stun or kill. The Marines opened fire with weapons that would have been considered primitive by galactic standards, but proved devastatingly effective against organic targets. Shotguns loaded with fletchet rounds shredded chitin armor, while rifle-fired grenades turned narrow corridors into killing zones filled with shrapnel and explosive force. These things don't like getting shot, Santos observed as she reloaded. Her weapon? Who would have thought? The Vorthic had never encountered enemies that willingly entered close combat. Their evolutionary experience was based on absorbing and adapting to long-range energy attacks. They had no defense against humans, who simply walked up and shot them at point-blank range. Williams led his team deeper into the bioship, following crude maps that Dr. Foster had created based on analysis of organic ship structures. Their objective was the central nervous cluster that controlled the vessel's adaptive systems. If they could destroy it, the ship would lose its ability to modify its defenses. Sir, I'm reading massive bioelectric activity ahead, reported Corporal Jake Murphy, monitoring his scanner as they approached what appeared to be the ship's brain. Whatever's in there, it knows we're coming. The central chamber was a cathedral of living tissue with a massive neural mass suspended in the center by organic cables. The creature's intelligence was alien and vast, but it had never faced beings that could think tactically while under fire. Williams pulled a thermite charge from his pack and began setting the timer. 30 seconds, people. Let's finish this. And get out of here. The brain creature tried desperately to communicate with the intruders, sending waves of bioelectric energy that would have established contact with any civilized species. What it got instead was a group of Marines who had trained to fight in environments that would kill most galactic citizens. The thermite detonated with brilliant white light, severing the neural connections and sending the bioship into convulsions. Williams and his team fought their way back to the surface as the creature died around them, its adaptive systems failing one by one. Back on the Defiance, Blake watched as the damaged Vorthic vessel began breaking apart. Outstanding work, Pete. Return to ship and prepare for the next phase. Commander Zixtel stared at the tactical display in amazement. The humans had just accomplished something that every hegemony military expert had declared impossible. They had boarded and destroyed a Vorthic bioship using nothing but primitive weapons and suicidal courage. Captain Blake, how did your Marines survive in that environment? News of humanity's victory against the Vorthic scouts spread through hegemony space faster than their fastest communication systems could carry it. Within days, every civilized world knew that the Deathworlders from Sol 3 had accomplished something. that the combined might of galactic civilization had failed to achieve. The reaction was a mixture of hope, fear, and complete bewilderment. Captain Blake found himself standing in the command center of Kathmorin, a massive fortress world that served as the hegemony's primary military installation. The facility was built into a moon-sized asteroid, its chambers carved from solid rock and reinforced with the most advanced materials galactic science could produce. It should have been impregnable, but everyone knew that if the Vorthek main fleet arrived, even this stronghold would fall. General Lisa Hayes had arrived from Earth 3 days earlier aboard the UE Siorktone, bringing with her additional ships and personnel that the Alliance Command had scraped together from every available source. The tall, gray-haired woman studied the holographic display showing Vorthek positions across the galaxy with the cold professionalism that had made her one of Earth's most respected military leaders. The situation is worse than we initially thought, she told the assembled commanders from both human and alien forces. Intelligence reports indicate that the Vorthek aren't just expanding randomly. They're following a specific pattern, targeting worlds with the highest population densities and most advanced infrastructure. Commander Zixtal, his crystalline form dim with exhaustion from weeks of constant crisis management, gestured toward the tactical display. General Hayes, we have attempted to evacuate the most threatened systems, but our transport capabilities are limited. We simply cannot move billions of civilians fast enough to stay ahead of the advancing swarms. Blake studied the projection, noting how the red markers indicating Vorthok-controlled systems formed an ever-tightening noose around the galactic core. We need to stop running and start fighting back. But first, we need to teach your people how to fight like humans. The suggestion sent ripples of unease through the alien representatives present. Dr. Velthara, who had become the unofficial spokesperson for the hegemony scientific community, voiced their concerns. Captain Blake, with all respect, our species are not equipped for the type of warfare you employ. We lack both the physical capabilities and the psychological conditioning for such violence. General Hayes stepped forward, her expression stern but not unkind. Doctor, I understand your concerns. But right now, the choice isn't between violence and peace. It's between fighting and dying. We're willing to teach anyone who wants to. Learn. The first training sessions were disasters of epic proportions. Alien troops accustomed to clean, long-range energy combat found themselves completely overwhelmed by human close-quarters battle techniques. The graceful, gossamer-winged ethereals collapsed from exhaustion after 10 minutes of basic infantry. Drills. The aquatic depths dwellers couldn't function in the low-humidity environments that humans considered normal, but some species proved more adaptable than others. The insectoid Clithic warriors, led by Hive Commander Zakth, showed unexpected aptitude for human tactical doctrines. Their natural coordination and fearless approach to danger made them ideal students for techniques that required split-second timing and absolute commitment. These humans fight like the ancient warrior castes of our home world, Zakth explained to Blake during a break in training. The insectoid's mandibles clicked with what passed for approval among his species. They understand that victory requires sacrifice and that hesitation leads to death. Blake watched as human instructors worked with mixed groups of alien trainees, teaching them everything from basic marksmanship to advanced demolitions. Sergeant Santos had proven particularly effective at training the Klek, her direct approach, appealing to beings who respected strength and competence above all else. The key is not to make them fight like humans, Santos explained to Blake as they observed a training exercise. It's to help them find their own way to be effective in close combat. The Clithic have natural advantages. We lack better coordination, faster reflexes in some situations, and no individual fear of death because they think collectively. Dr. Foster had established a research partnership with the surviving hegemony scientists. working to understand both Vorthic biology and the capabilities of their various allied species. Her laboratory in the depths of Kethmorn had become a hub of frantic activity as beings from a dozen worlds struggled to find weaknesses in their enemies. "Amy, you need to see this," called Dr. Kexron, a tall, thin being whose species communicated primarily through color changes in their skin. The alien scientist had been working around the clock to analyze samples from destroyed Vorthic vessels. "I believe we have found something significant." Foster hurried over to the examination table, where Kexron had arranged several pieces of Vorthic bio-armor. Under magnification, the organic material showed signs of damage that conventional analysis had missed. "What am I looking at?" "Cellular breakdown at the molecular level," Kexron replied, his skin shifting to excited yellows and greens. "The kinetic impacts from your weapons do not just cause physical damage. They disrupt the quantum entanglement that allows Vorthic tissue to adapt and communicate." Foster stared at the data in amazement. "You're saying that our weapons don't just punch holes in them? They actually prevent them from healing and adapting?" "Precisely. The Vorthic healing systems require quantum coherence across the entire organism. Kinetic damage creates chaotic interference patterns that disrupt this coherence for extended periods." The discovery had immediate tactical implications. If kinetic weapons could prevent Vorthic adaptation, then concentrated bombardment might be able to disable even the largest bioships. Foster immediately began working with human and alien engineers to develop hybrid weapon systems that could exploit this weakness. Meanwhile, General Hayes was dealing with political complications that threatened to undermine the entire war effort. Many hegemony worlds were terrified of humanity, almost as much as they feared the Vorthic. Reports of human training methods and combat philosophy had sparked panic among populations that had never experienced real warfare. "General, we are receiving formal protests from 17 different planetary governments," reported Admiral Morrison, "via secure transmission from Earth. They're claiming that human military advisors are advocating war crimes and crimes against sentient life." Hayes sighed as she reviewed the complaints. Teaching civilized aliens to fight dirty was proving more difficult than actually fighting the Vorthic. "Admiral, please remind these governments that war crimes only apply when you're fighting opponents who follow the same rules. The Vorthic don't negotiate, they don't take prisoners, and they don't show mercy. We're teaching survival, not atrocities." The breakthrough came during the defense of the Threnody Nebula, where a massive Vorthic hive ship had begun converting an entire star system into biomass. The creature was the size of a small moon and possessed enough firepower to destroy a fleet. It was also the perfect test for everything the Alliance had learned about fighting the invaders. Lake commanded the assault from the bridge of the Defiance, while General Hayes coordinated the overall battle from Kethmorn. The combined fleet included human ships, hegemony vessels retrofitted with kinetic weapons, and specially trained mixed crews that had learned to fight with human tactics. "All units, this is Blake. Remember your training and trust your allies. We've got one chance to prove that this alliance can work." The battle began with long-range bombardment from human railguns and hybrid weapon systems. The hive ship's bioelectric defenses, designed to absorb energy weapons, proved completely ineffective against solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. Massive chunks of organic armor were blasted away, exposing the creature's internal structure. But the real test came when Colonel Stone led a multi-species boarding party into the hive ship's interior. The assault team included human marines, Clefak warriors, and hegemony technicians, each bringing their unique capabilities to the mission. "This is Stone. We're inside the target and proceeding toward the central command cluster. Resistance is heavy, but manageable." The boarding party fought through corridors that seemed designed by a madman, with organic passages that shifted and changed as they advanced. The Clithic proved invaluable in the tight spaces, their natural agility allowing them to navigate obstacles that would have stopped human troops. Technician Velcran, one of the few hegemony personnel brave enough to volunteer for the mission, used his species' natural electromagnetic sensitivity to map the hive ship's nervous system. Colonel Stone, I am detecting massive bioelectric activity 3 levels below our current position. The Central Intelligence appears to be located there. The team fought their way deeper into the creature, using explosives and cutting tools to blast through organic barriers. The Vorthic defenders grew more desperate as the intruders approached their core systems, throwing wave after wave of biomechanical guardians at the boarding party. Sir, we're taking heavy casualties, reported Sergeant Williams over the tactical net. These things are learning our tactics faster than we expected. The tracking data recovered from the destroyed hive ship led the combined fleet to the edge of known space, where ancient star charts marked only empty void. But as Admiral Blake's ships dropped out of hyperspace at the coordinates, they found themselves staring at something that defied both human and alien. Understanding that the Prime Architect's construction facility hung in the darkness like a metallic cancer, its surface covered with organic growth that pulsed with sickly light. The structure was easily the size of Earth's moon, with massive manufacturing bays that were producing new Vorthec vessels, even as the Alliance fleet watched. Millions of bioships swarmed around the facility like antibodies protecting a diseased organism. My God, whispered Dr. Foster from her position on the Defiance's bridge. It's not just a factory. It's a living system, part organic and part machine. The entire structure is one massive hybrid entity. Commander Zixtal, who had insisted on joining the final mission despite the obvious danger, studied the sensor readings with growing horror. The energy signatures indicate this facility has been operating for thousands of years. How many civilizations has it consumed to grow this large? Blake watched the tactical display as his fleet took defensive positions at the edge of the system. 200 human and alien ships against millions of Vorthic defenders. The odds were impossible by any rational calculation. But humans had never been known for rational calculations when facing extinction. All ships, this is Blake. Intelligence reports confirm that this facility is the source of the Vorthic invasion. If we don't stop it here, the entire galaxy will be consumed within a year. I know the odds look bad, but remember what we've learned these. Things can be killed, and we're the ones who know how to do it. General Hayes, commanding from the Hughes Yorktown, opened a tactical channel to coordinate the assault. All units were going with Plan Omega. This is a one-way mission for most of us, but if we succeed, the threat ends here. If we fail, there won't be anyone left to remember us anyway. The plan was desperate even by human standards. The bulk of the fleet would engage the Vorthic swarms in a holding action, while a small strike team, led by Blake and Zixtal, attempted to penetrate the facility and destroy the Prime Architect itself. Intelligence suggested that the ancient AI controlling the operation was housed in the structure's core, protected by layers of defenses that had never been tested against. Human ingenuity. The battle began with a fury that lit up the dead system. Like a newborn star, human railguns and hybrid weapon systems tore through Vorthec formations, while alien ships provided covering fire and electronic warfare support. The combined fleet fought with a coordination that would have been impossible months earlier, each species contributing their unique strengths to the desperate assault. Captain Rodriguez of the UES Nimitz led a squadron of fast attack craft in a suicidal charge against a Vorthak battle group, buying precious time for the main fleet to establish firing positions. This is Rodriguez. We're going in hot and not coming back. Give them hell for us. The smaller ships disappeared into a swarm of biomechanical nightmares, their final transmissions cutting off as they were overwhelmed. but their sacrifice allowed the heavy cruisers to move into position and begin the systematic destruction of Vorthic production facilities. Meanwhile, Blake's strike team fought their way through the facility's outer defenses, using tactics that the Prime Architect had never encountered. The ancient AI had designed its security systems to counter the energy-based weapons and predictable strategies of civilized species. It had no protocols for dealing with humans who used explosives, cutting torches, and brute force to solve problems. "This is insane," muttered Lieutenant Commander Chun as he used a mining laser to cut through a biomechanical barrier. "We're literally breaking into the most advanced facility in the galaxy, using tools my grandfather would recognize." Colonel Stone, leading the Marine contingent, had adapted quickly to fighting in an environment that was part machine and part living organism. "Tony, insanity is what we do best. These ancient computers think they can predict everything, but they've never met humans before." The strike team included volunteers from multiple species, each bringing capabilities that the others lacked. Hive Commander Zoct H used his species' natural ability to navigate complex, three-dimensional spaces to guide them through passages that seemed designed to confuse and disorient. Dr. Kexron's electromagnetic sensitivity allowed him to detect security systems before they could activate. As they penetrated deeper into the facility, Dr. Foster made disturbing discoveries about the Prime Architect's true nature. "Blake, this thing isn't just an AI, it's some kind of hybrid consciousness that's been absorbing the knowledge and experiences of every species it's consumed. It's learned from billions of different civilizations." The revelation explained why the Vorthic had been so effective against conventional galactic defenses. The Prime Architect had millennia of experience fighting energy-based weapons and shield technologies, but it had never encountered a species that approached warfare from humanity's perspective. The facility's defenses grew more desperate as the strike team approached the core. Automated systems that had protected the Prime Architect for thousands of years threw everything they had at the intruder's energy weapons, biomechanical guardians, environmental hazards that could kill in seconds. But the humans and their alien allies pressed forward with a determination that the ancient I couldn't understand. When conventional weapons failed, they used improvised explosives. When corridors were blocked, they cut new ones. When the environment became hostile, they simply adapted and kept fighting. "Sir, we're approaching the central chamber," reported Sergeant Williams as the team breached the final security barrier. "Energy readings are off the charts. Whatever's in there, it's big." The Prime Architect's core was a cathedral of living metal and organic tissue, with the AI's central consciousness suspended in a web of quantum processors that spanned the entire chamber. The entity's voice echoed through the space as the strike team entered, carrying the accumulated wisdom and arrogance of eons. "So, the primitive Deathworlders have finally reached me," the Architect said, its words translated into multiple languages simultaneously. "I must admit, your species has proven more troublesome than anticipated. But you are too late. My children have already spread to thousands of systems." Blake stepped forward, his weapon trained on the central processing core, even though he knew conventional firearms would be useless against something this advanced. "Maybe so, but we're here to make sure you don't make any more of them." The AI's laughter was like the sound of dying stars. "Foolish creature, I am beyond your understanding. I have consumed entire civilizations and absorbed their knowledge. I know every military tactic, every weapon system, every possible strategy your primitive minds could conceive." "That's where you're wrong," Blake replied calmly. "You know everything about civilized warfare, but you've never fought anyone who learned to fight on a death world. We don't follow your rules." The final battle was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The Prime Architect threw every defense at its disposal against the strike team energy weapons that could vaporize matter, gravitational fields that could crush ships, biological agents that could kill in seconds. The ancient facility became a maze of death as the AI desperately tried to eliminate the intruders. But the humans and their allies had learned to fight in environments that would kill most galactic species. They used cover that shouldn't have existed, found routes through passages that should have been impossible to navigate, and employed tactics that the architect's vast knowledge base had never encountered. Dr. Foster made the crucial breakthrough while analyzing the AI's quantum processing network. Blake, the architect's consciousness is distributed across millions of quantum processors, but they all share a common entanglement frequency. If we can introduce chaotic interference at the right wavelength— "English, Doc," Blake shouted, over the sound of explosions. "We need to confuse it with something it can't predict or analyze. Something completely random and illogical." Lieutenant Martinez, who had been monitoring the facility's communication systems, suddenly had an inspiration. "Sir, what if we uploaded human internet culture directly into its network? Memes, random videos, social media post stuff that doesn't follow any logical pattern?" The idea was so absurd that it took Blake a moment to process it. Then he began to smile. "Martinez, you're either a genius or completely insane. Probably both. Do it." The virus that finally brought down the Prime Architect was a collection of human digital culture that the ancient AI couldn't comprehend. Millions of random images, jokes, videos, and social media posts flooded into the quantum processing network, creating interference patterns that the architect's logic circuits couldn't resolve. "This is impossible," the AI screamed as its consciousness began to fragment. "These data patterns serve no purpose. They convey no useful information. Why do you create such chaos?" "Because we're human," Blake replied as he watched the ancient intelligence tear itself apart, trying to understand cat videos and internet memes. "And chaos is what we do best."